Hey everyone, welcome to episode 39 of PixlFeed Radio, and I'm here with my friend Phil Rivers, who's an expert in email marketing, which I have to admit, email is like, I know how it works, I've done plenty of it, but it's not my strongest, I don't want to say asset, that's not the word for it, but like skill, I guess you could call it, because I hate copywriting, even though I can do it. And dealing with domains and all that stuff can get pretty old. So that's why I'm excited to have you here, because I've been through it all. So, and the way you got a hold of me was a cold email. So for anybody who's watching this and thinks that cold email doesn't work, well, guess what? It works for Phil. What's up, man? How you doing?
What up, man? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Cold email works. All email works.
Absolutely. People have this really crazy idea that email doesn't work, but I can assure you, everyone checks their email. It's just a matter of, is your subject line good enough for them to click on it and actually open it?
Yep.
You know, I mean, most people have 2 to 3 email addresses. You have like the real email address for important stuff. Then you have the one that you started in high school, or yeah, in my case, it was high school, you know, when AOL was around. And, you know, that's all I am. And then you have the personal and the work one, right? So there's always a way to get a hold of somebody. And I mean, I'm sure Phil can tell you this. I've gotten emails back from CEOs, like from Fortune 500 companies at 4 a.m. on a Saturday. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. So before we're going to go into everything that it is, cold emailing in general, strategies, all that good stuff, how Phil does it, who he does it for, how he helps people with it, companies with it, entrepreneurs alike. But before we get there, man, how did you get started? What's the background? How, you know, did you start in sales, marketing? How did you get to where you're at today?
So I started, like back in the day, this is like early e-com. Facebook didn't exist yet. There was no Shopify. There was no, I don't even know, MailChimp was around.
So you're an OG. You're an OG.
Yeah, dude. This is like 2005-ish.
Okay.
And there at the time, there were these Nike shoes that were very popular, Nike Dunks. And I would go and have t-shirts designed that coincided with the releases of these shoes, and I would sell the t-shirts in message boards.
Nice.
And so there was no storefront, but I just built a list of people that were sneakerheads at the time. That wasn't even a word yet, and were interested in or had bought this before, and I would just like blast people when there was a new dunk coming and we had a t-shirt designed, and we would transact in PayPal. So it was very guerrilla. And then as e-com matured and I got older, or, you know, more experienced, I kind of just, like every business I've had or been involved in, I've always kind of taken to how do I build an audience, nurture them, and monetize. And if you do that well, consistently for any business, doesn't matter what you sell, you'll always have a market to communicate with and sell to, because you'll have an audience that you own. So I guess I just kind of learned that early. And as all of the sort of fads, or tactics have come and gone, you know, social or whatever, email has just been the one thing that stayed true that I've always kind of come back to. That I tell people just works like bread and butter.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, and if you watch enough of the videos here or listen to enough of the podcast, I tell people all the time, the money's on the list. And even when I was starting, it took me, like, it didn't click with me right away, because I was so concentrated on just getting sales that I didn't think of nurturing those people or keeping up with them. You know what I mean? Especially being in a background of sales like I have, and having a brick and mortar business, how I got started back in the day. But I tell people all the time, the money's on the list, man. You just got to do the numbers. You can send an email out, and it's like your personal ATM, you know, a t-shirt, whatever, you know?
People get it twisted a lot, Christian. Like, you know, people want the fast hit all the time.
Right.
And so email, it takes a little bit to build the audience, and you can't, especially nowadays, you can't just nurture them with a blindfold on and just blast them 24/7, 365. Right. It doesn't work anymore. And so I feel like people just like sort of push it to the side, because it takes a little thought and effort at the outset. But once you sort of get the momentum going, it's like the most consistent, profitable channel that there is. And so I think people overlook it.
Yeah,
as a result of those things.
I mean, I can tell you, I'm guilty of overlooking my own personal list, even though it's nurture and you know, and it's consistently going. Like it could do so much better, but it's one of those things that have some other stuff going on that I just haven't really concentrated on it, and I haven't even monetized it. You know, it's just pure content. So you know, it'll pay off by itself at some point. Yeah. So I'm not in a hurry for it. But I know it's important. I mean, with my e-com stores, that's, right now, for example, Facebook, it's a mess when it comes to all the updates they're doing. The elections are coming up, costs are through the roof. Guess what? All it takes is one email and it makes up for that horrible day through Facebook. But there's an art to it. You can't just blast buy. You got to offer some value. So what do you want to get started? You want to start talking about e-com, or you want to talk about, lead gen for entrepreneurs? I can talk both all day. So
I think the way that I kind of look at it, Christian, they're kind of one and the same. And so the way that the perspective in which I look at it is that it doesn't matter what you're selling. It really just comes down to how do you build an audience, communicate with them throughout the life cycle, get them primed to buy. And once they buy, you've done the hardest thing that there is to do, which is get someone to give you their credit card the first time. So how do you get them to buy? Knowing that, how do you get them to buy second, third, fourth, fifth time, which is where all the profitability is long-term for pretty much any business.
Right.
So we can talk about it through the lens of lead gen, e-com. Doesn't matter. I think it all boils down to the same stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about let's set different scenarios and how you handle it, if that's okay with you. So all right. So obviously a personal list, right? So I started my YouTube channel, the podcast, all that stuff. So eventually people start opting in. They go into my list. So there's that trust built because I have social proof already. But let's talk about someone who has no social proof. They're starting out and they're trying to get people to opt in into their list with just cold emails. How do you approach that scenario to start building that list?
I mean, I think that no matter what you're selling, you got to start somewhere, whether you have an e-com store or whatever. And so to your point, in terms of getting opt-ins initially, you got to give them something worth opting in for.
Right.
And so if you're going to email someone cold to opt in, like that email has to be pretty meaty.
Has to be pretty good, yeah.
Juiced up enough to not only click, but then sign up on the next page. So I think the first things first in that context is like, what are you going to give them that's high value in exchange for that valuable piece of information, which is their email address. So,
right.
And like obviously, there's not one thing that every listener can do, right, to build that valuable piece of content they can give away for free. But I just think that it comes to keeping your ear to the street and be like, well, what is just some angle that they can come up with that would be interesting to the people that they're trying to sell to get them in and start to build trust.
And they should niche down, right? It shouldn't be just like a shotgun approach. A lot of people, I feel like they go for the shotgun approach when they're trying to buy a list. And it's like, the more you niche down, the better your results are going to be. That's my opinion, because now you're talking directly to that audience, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Riches and niches.
Yeah, riches and niches. I haven't heard that one in a while. That's a good one. So that's one way to do it. And then, okay, so there's a lot of people who watch this channel, listen to this, that are on the agency side of things. And I know when I was starting my consulting side of things, when I wanted to expand, I was doing a lot of, cold emailing. We actually talked about this before we went live. And a lot of the issues that I was having is domains getting blacklisted, the Google filters. I was using programs like Mailshake. I can't think of the other ones. There's like 3 more, but I can't think top of my head right now, of course.
Mailshake's what I've used in the past also. Yeah,
Mailshake is pretty good. So I use all those programs where you can actually load up the campaigns. You can time them 48 hours, 8 hours, whatever you want. But after a while, the spam filters will get to you, even if you're setting up your DKIM, your SP, what is it called? SP, I would say SPF, but it's not
SPIF, yeah.
SPIF. So how do you, when you're blasting for lead gen, obviously you're scraping the information from LinkedIn, or you're hiring a data scraper to go on the web and scrape all these sites to get all these people's informations, which you shouldn't be doing that. You should get people to opt in because it's the Spam Act or whatever. But let's say allegedly you're doing that and you're sending these emails out. How do you get, like, the way the filters are getting, I haven't done it in years, but with the filters that, they were getting pretty good at the time, where you can only have a domain go for, I don't know, a few weeks and it'll get burned out, even if you warmed up the account and kept emailing. Is it worse now, or is there ways to still do it?
It's like, I mean, it still works. I think it all comes down to, like, if you're reaching out cold, putting thought and effort into who are you reaching out to, what would make sense, what's going to entice them to not only open but consume the message and then take whatever action you're asking them to take, having no understanding of who you are when they open the email. And I think that's where a lot of people get messed up, Christian, is they don't put forth the effort at the outset to think like about the audience, be empathetic to what they're going to send, and they think about it, they kind of approach it selfishly. And so in doing it the selfish way, you're not going to get very good results, very good opens or clicks or opt-ins, simply because it's like done from a self-serving point of view. But if you do it from the sense of like, this is the target, this is the avatar I'm trying to focus on, you niche down, right? And create something that's enticing them, and think of and curate a message that doesn't have to be written by an expert copywriter, but that's just written in the sense of like, this is for them, not for you. You'll have good results, and then at the end, or better results than you would if you did it just like blindfolded, sending the same thing to everybody, not niching down and stuff. Like that will be shown in terms of what gets delivered, what gets sent to the inbox, and your domain reputation also. And so I always go back to just like start off on the right foot from a like foundational strategic perspective, and the rest will take care of itself. Like a lot of it we have no control over, meaning us, the users that are doing the emailing. Like Google has their algorithms, they're going to judge it one way or the other. So how do I just stack the deck in my favor, knowing that there's all this variability that I have no control over?
Right. And you can, I mean, if you have no control over it, the more targeted the message is, the less people are most likely to hit you as a spam or just open and ignore your email, which that's the other thing. Even when I did it, I always gave an option to opt out, because if you're not, you're just hurting yourself, because they're going to hit the spam button, and then you're going to lose that domain. And let's face it. I mean, if you're doing this for real, you're buying like 10, 20 domains, that's another thing. You never use your real domain. I learned that one when I was first starting out quick. Never use your real domain. So always use like a different version of it, like .net, .info, whatever. But don't use your real domain, because eventually you can get blacklisted. And then, if you're trying to send emails out of that, it's not going to work. It's going to go to the spam folder. So, okay, cool. So when a customer, what are the types of clients that you deal with, that you help? Is it big companies, small companies, entrepreneurs?
All different sizes. By and large, I would say like our bread and butter is e-com businesses.
Okay.
But I've worked with companies that sell info, that sell coaching, that's agencies that sell agency services. So again, it doesn't really matter. I don't discriminate. I think that any business that has, what I look for and that we work with is like, who does the underlying business have product market fit? Like there's an existing business that's proven, has some momentum and is off the ground. And that way, what you can do is bolt on email and or SMS to what's already working. And then it's like pouring jet fuel on top of the systems they already have in place. So that's what I really look for. I don't really care about size. I just try to identify people that they have some momentum and there is a functioning business there. It's not like they started yesterday.
So, okay. So a lot of people who are watching this, they do e-com with Shopify and all that good stuff. So my go-to whenever I launch a store with my team is we have the post-purchase sequence, abandonment cart sequence, dropped, from view page sequence, because we try to catch the email as soon as they land on the site. So if we do get their email, if they view content, a product, we're going to hit them with an email to come back as well. Then post-purchase sequence with an upsell, then follow through on the whole journey until the product ships out. And then after that, the tracking number goes out. Then we have another sequence where is reviews, to get them to do a review. Those are like my basics go-to. And then obviously we start working on campaigns and all that good stuff as we go. So when a client approaches you, let's say in e-commerce, what is the stack that you start with, and where do you expand from there as far as like the type of sequences you recommend on the ones that you guys use?
Yeah, so the way that I look at it is like there's the foundational components, kind of like what you mentioned. I can touch on that. And then once there's a solid foundation in place, which, Christian, you'd be surprised like how many people or how many stores don't have these foundational components set up in a way that they're like firing all
I've seen it. I've seen it, so I know.
Contributing a healthy percentage of revenue every month. Most people, just like they're completely lost. It's crazy. And then once this foundation is set, then I look to like, depending on the underlying business itself then what opportunities are there within it to spin up what I call cascading flows or get more sophisticated with segmentation and campaigns, just based on, again, the underlying business, how their product is consumed and how their audience likes to consume messages. So
that's a bug. One of the questions that I get the most is that, I started my store and, I only have a few products and I want to start sending emails out, but I don't know what to send out. So I always tell them, even when you're starting out, you should provide a little bit of value and then ask for the sale. So when it's a store, I know it can get very repetitive with the campaigns, because obviously the ultimate goal is to get them to come back and buy something from you. And let's face it, most small businesses, they're not adding new collections or new products on a daily basis where you can, hey, we got a new product, come check it out and buy it. So how do you get creative? How do you get creative with the type of emails that you can keep sending out, so it's not repetitive and people don't, unsubscribe from your email list? Like, did you build them in a way where you offer a little bit of content and, hey, come back to the store? Like, how do you get creative with that? Like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't deal with that stuff anymore in my own store, so I have people do it. But I like to hear other people's perspective on this. So
yeah, normally the way that I approach it is like, so we're talking about through the lens of campaigns for everyone listening, right?
Right.
And so from experience, like there's been stores that we've worked with, they're a one product store, literally one product. There's nothing to cross sell. There's nothing to upsell.
That's tough.
And that's tough, and it's tough to message on from a campaign perspective, right? Because people either come in from paid or organic channels and they either buy immediately or they get a few emails and ultimately buy. But then at some point, there's the people that bought, it's hard to sell them something else. Mm-hmm. And for the new people, if they've been on the list for a while, they're obviously tuned out and don't want the product. And so they're not really going to buy either. So there's a very small window with this particular business to like send campaigns and flows or automation strategically to get that purchase. So it's accounted for and then keep it moving. But to your point, or to answer your question, Christian, the way that I look at it is from a campaign side, there's kind of three like overarching categories that I look to come up with ideas to what to communicate. The first is like offer related. And this is really about the product. It's not necessarily like a discount or a promo, but it's an email in which you're talking about the product or highlighting the product or product benefit, value prop, whatever it is. Then another category is like trust builders. So what content exists for the product? Maybe it's UGC, maybe it's reviews, maybe it's like how the product is made, how the origin story of the business or the product, whatever, something like that. That gives kind of the audience, it's like value, but it's value masquerading as a message about the product, just not overtly buy this, right? Mm-hmm. And then the third category is content. So like, is our content on the blog? What content is the business creating for social already that can be repurposed? Again, what UGC is out there, what's happening like broadly in society that they could ride the coattails of to lead with that message and then tie in their business or product to it. And so normally I'll just like kind of have those three things on a piece of paper and just write down any idea that comes to mind that fits within those categories. And then back into, are these themes that we can communicate regularly? Or is these just like one-off campaigns based on certain dates or things that are going on to help me plan what the calendar is going to look like for the foreseeable future? So that's how I usually come up with campaigns. And
definitely another thing that people don't think about is that they should pre-plan their sequences based on the holidays coming up too. Like right now is, what is it, September? End of September.
Yep.
So, Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving's coming up, Black Friday, Christmas, the whole 9 yards. So they should already be building all those campaigns to be ready for those holidays, right?
At least have an idea of what they want to communicate. Like most people, this is their strategy. Buy a bunch of paid ads, have no system in place to capture leads and nurture them, and come up with their Black Friday, Cyber Monday discount the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And they hope or pray that they're going to be successful or that this year will be better or different than last year. And so there's no real strategy in place in that context, but that's unfortunately what most people do, because they don't want, I don't know what it is, Christian, but there's like people are apprehensive to invest a little time and thought to set stuff up to be successful. And it's also almost like it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like, oh, well, if it's not successful, then at least we didn't take the time, and at least the onus isn't on us for being a failure because we didn't take the time to strategize.
Right.
And so I think you're exactly right. Like if you're listening, you don't have a sort of a framework for what you want to communicate for end of October through November and December, like I would spend some time ASAP mapping it out.
You're so right. And I can tell you that just from seeing the stats on my own YouTube channel, because I get to see like obviously what playlists people watch the most and what videos they watch the most and for how long. And obviously, you know, I get the questions and the comments, and 90% is Facebook ads. And people like to focus on Facebook ads. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, dude, half of the battles you're offering the store. You know, I met these people that they know all the intricates and I call them little hacks, because there's no little hacks like there used to be 5 years ago. It's gotten pretty, you know, standard. So they try to concentrate on these little hacks to like get, you know, a 0.5 higher ROAS, you know, through the ads, or, you know, a higher click-through rate or a lower CPC. And then they're like, well, but it's not consistent and it's not, you know, or it doesn't work. And then you go to their store and the store looks like shit. I'm like, dude, that looks like something was built in 1993. Like, would you buy anything from that store? No. Like, what makes you think that people are going to click from an ad and buy from that store? And then email is the same thing. They don't take the time to create these sequences and segment everything out and actually talk to these people in a manner where it actually connects with them. So it's like you said, and then it doesn't work. They blame it. Oh, it just doesn't work. It's like, it's just, you know, who cares? Like, you know,
well, it's like a systemic thing, Christian. Like, paid traffic gets all the attention because it's sexy and it's fast.
Right.
No one's thinking about like being fundamentally sound and building the infrastructure the right way for the long term and having an asset that they own and control. Right. And so to your point, they focus on Facebook ads, try and get a marginally higher ROAS, but not looking at like, okay, even if I'm running paid well, it's still the budget for paid eats into the profit margin. They're giving away discount usually to acquire a first-time user.
Right.
And then from there, there's no back-end strategy to, number one, to try and capture and nurture all the paid traffic that came that day, didn't buy, which most websites, their conversion rate is what, 2%, 3%, maybe? Like, that's a unicorn. And so 98% of the traffic any day that they paid for leaves, then they have to pay again to retarget. But if they spend a little bit of effort, time, money, etc., into figuring out like, how do we capture as many leads as possible, and then how do we communicate with them so that we own the method of communication and we don't have to pay forever to Facebook, Google, whomever, for traffic, then all of a sudden, like, there's this like amazing compounding effect when that's done. It doesn't take that long, especially if the business is proven, for that to get up and running and start to pay dividends. But once that starts to happen, there's like a compounding effect on every day this traffic is coming. You're converting 5-10% of that traffic into leads, and a percentage of that traffic is buying either from flows or campaigns. And then once they buy once, because you're thinking about the long tail and manufacturing purchases 2, 3, 4, 5, then all of a sudden you have a lot more sort of protection from paid social. You're not riding the volatility roller coaster week to week, hunting for that 0.5 extra ROAS, because you know the back end and all the profitability is under your umbrella that you control, and you're just worried about driving the most efficient traffic cold to begin with, and then leaning into the stuff that you have complete control over that doesn't cost an arm and a leg budget wise every single day, every single month. And so I think there's like people, they're just like missing the boat completely when it comes to their audience and the back end piece, and in lieu of just foaming at the mouth over paid social.
Right. It's like, you know, the basic sequences that I mentioned when we're talking about e-com, like the post-purchase, the abandonment card, whatever. If you start a store and you set those up, those by themselves, if you write something decent and you do it right, it can literally give you like anywhere between like 14%, 18% of revenue a month in your store. That's like free money. Like, you're not doing anything. Once you set it up, it's done. You know, unless you should keep optimizing and split testing to get as high as you can. But just to give you an idea, I mean, that's how much money you can make, and do the math. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, man. So what I've seen time and time again is, what people have a tendency to do is just like use templates.
Right.
For like, whether it's MailChimp or Klaviyo or whatever tool they're using, use templates because it's the path of least resistance, requires virtually no effort. They can turn it on, and then in their head they're like, oh, email's on, I don't have to worry about it. And then what happens by and large is they either don't know what email contributes revenue-wise every month, or they're like, oh, this is doing 5%. This is good. I'll take what I can get, not realizing that it should be 30, 35, 40%.
Right.
And so if you like, again, I just think it's approached by and large the wrong way with people. Like, instead of doing the bare minimum to get virtually no results, they spend a little bit more time, effort at the outset, that their email should pay them like an annuity every single month, 30 to 40% of their revenue. That otherwise right now they're virtually capturing none of that.
Especially if you have a good product, if you're a good brand, you know, I'm talking about like, if you have a really good brand, I mean, it's insane the kind of numbers you can do with email, right?
Yeah. Well, let's say, for example, like let's say there's a store and they're running 10 grand a month in paid budget, right? Which is, it's decent, but the store can only be so big, right? But let's just say 10 grand.
Yeah.
And let's say they're getting 3x ROAS, right? So they're doing 30K top line off of the 10K spend. Having email in place would literally get them another $10,000 in revenue that month, nothing else being changed. Budget stays 10K, they're getting 30K, 3x ROAS, 30K top line. And again, just having email in place, they should get another 10% another 30% revenue, so another 10,000. So 40K for the month. And then as the business scales, more budget for paid, there's more pie for email to deliver. So the percentage 30, 40% stays the same, but the dollar amount increases as the store grows.
And
so,
yeah, and the famous words by Dan Kennedy, whoever spends the most wins. You know?
Yep.
So if you're making all that extra revenue, I mean, you can attack from so many other different. I mean, if you're only doing Facebook, guess what? That extra revenue, let's go to Google, or let's go to Snapchat, let's go to TikTok, let's go to Pinterest. You know, depending on the brand, obviously, but yeah, it can do a lot more. So
it affords a lot of opportunities to reinvest back into the business, whatever that means for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people are missing the boat big time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned Klaviyo. I personally use Klaviyo. I love Klaviyo. I use Klaviyo and ActiveCampaign for my, list nurturing, and then ecom. And then I mentioned Milkshake. I don't even know if we were live when I mentioned it, but I mentioned Milkshake as well for like cold emailing.
Cold, yeah.
What is your preference when it comes to software for ecom, or just, nurturing? Like, I use my ActiveCampaign for nurturing or backend sequences on a funnel. So
yeah.
Which platforms do you prefer?
I prefer Klaviyo, especially for ecom. It's like Klaviyo was built for ecom, literally purebred for it. Whereas all these other platforms, MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, Drip, whatever, they've all been like retrofitted to work for ecom, but the product wasn't designed for it, right? And so there's a lot left to be desired from a feature perspective on those other tools. That's why. So for ecom, for anyone listening, like even if their store is just starting out, or they're doing 20 grand a month or 50 grand a month and want to be much bigger, I would say choose the tool that's built for where you want to be, not where you are right now. And 9.9 times out of 10, that's going to be Klaviyo for ecom. Outside of ecom, I personally used to run ActiveCampaign also like you, but what I didn't like about it is just like the lack of insight and control you have over things within there, and reporting. And so I actually just built a custom Klaviyo integration into my ClickFunnels for my stuff.
Really?
And the reporting is so much better. I'll send you some screenshots so you can see it. And
yeah, I would love to see that. Yeah, absolutely.
I built this thing. There's just so much more clarity in Klaviyo as opposed to ActiveCampaign. And you sacrifice some things. It just comes down to preference. But
what are you looking for? What are you looking for in the reporting? Like you mentioned, you built your own dashboard, but what are you looking for in ActiveCampaign that you think it's missing? Because I mean, I go into reports, but again, I don't specialize on emailing. I know what to keep an eye on and what needs to be done, but
it's okay. Like for me, for my stuff,
right?
For my own business and my marketing.
Sure.
What I'm looking for is like the people that book a call with my team from an email, or the people that go and fill out the form prior to our call, that are doing that from an email. But within ActiveCampaign, like that stuff isn't inherently there. It's not.
Yeah.
Right. All it's really tracking is opens and clicks. That's it. And there's no tie back to the action item. Where for ecom, that's the revenue. For me, it's booking calls with my team.
Sure.
And so could you build it in with ActiveCampaign? Maybe. But I just have so much familiarity with Klaviyo, and I know how powerful and robust the tool is from not only a reporting perspective, but also like how easy it is to build triggers or develop segments in terms of who you want to send campaigns to and stuff. And just so it really was a reporting decision for me, but also just like, I know how powerful this tool is and I know how to harness it. So I'm going to just lean in all the way to that instead of try and just be unhappy with ActiveCampaign.
Sure. So, okay. So obviously you see a lot of, lists with what you do and a lot of, email stats and all that good stuff. What do you consider a good open rate and click-through rate if they take you up on your offer? Let's say on e-com first, and then just like like a personal list like mine. So let's start with e-com.
Yeah. So with e-com, I would say that on the low end, I think industry benchmarks are like 20%, right? That's the industry average for e-com. I think that's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
So if that is that would be my baseline, what I would tolerate is 20%, not an average, but if something like a campaign gets in and the open rate's 20%, it's like, okay, that's sufficient, but that shouldn't be the norm. That should be the exception on the low end. Right. So, but I say 25, 30, 35%. Okay. And that's where Christian, niches or segments come into play, right? Because what most people do is they send the same message to everyone, whether they bought something once or 5 times or never bought anything before. So this just comes down to like being empathetic, thinking about the audience, right? And being like, okay, even if you're sending the same message to every single person, tailoring it a little bit based on their segment, purchase history, behavior, whatever, so that it's a little bit more poignant to them. And as a result, the subject line should change usually, but opens will increase and so will clicks, because the message is, as they consume it, is just more geared towards kind of the headspace or buying cycle that they're in, respectively.
So we just now started segmenting a little bit more because I started pushing for it. I can't do it all, and that's why I have people who do it for me. So when you're going into Klaviyo, what are your favorite types of segments that you'd like to create on there for e-com?
Well, it's such a hard question because it's so broad. But I would say that let's say I'm working with someone that email's been like sort of hit hot and cold for them. Right? They don't do it consistently. They do it here and there, but they don't really have their thumb on the pulse of like how their audience engages with stuff. So at that point, what I would normally do is just start sending based on purchase history, whether they bought or not bought, right? Binary.
Right.
So, and then the other thing I would do it based on engagement within email and engagement on site. So again, for every business, it's different. But I would look at like how frequently have I sent in the past, and try and like draw a line in the sand of this is what I consider engaged and this is what I consider not engaged, right? It could be have received, a very common one is received 10 emails within the last 90 days, for example, and been active on site with some frequency within that period, or maybe 6 months, depending on the underlying product, and stack engagement and purchase history together so I can size up how big is the list of engaged customers or not, and how big is the list of unengaged leads or not. And from there, those are 4 key segments based on purchase and activity. And then from there, I can use that to be like, determine what I'm going to do with those 4 once I know what they look like.
Right.
So, so that just like provides opportunity go forward. It's not those 4 segments forever. It's just like for the first month or 6 weeks till there's some data, and then you can eat your own dog food. But a lot of people, they try and run before they crawl and try and just start segmenting up the ass when there's nothing really to segment yet.
Yeah, it's like I go into some of these Facebook ad accounts that I audit, and I go in there and they're like, they literally just started running ads, and all of a sudden I open these campaigns like lookalike 10%, lookalike 8%, lookalike. I'm like, for A2C, I'm like, you don't have the data yet. Like, what are you doing? Like, they think they're just like magical things that just work all of a sudden if you just create them. I'm like,
what I see the most, Christian, is like there's no most companies or stores, they're missing like an email system.
Yeah.
And an internal like process in terms
Listen,
of like,
I put it off for the longest time, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, I put it off for the longest time until I started seeing the numbers. And then, I mean, I started playing with Klaviyo years ago. And then the more they kept adding to it, I'm like, okay, this is like getting powerful, right? And then, that's when I started seeing like the true potential. I mean, it's always been there, but me personally, I never took it seriously until I want to say maybe 7 years ago. You know what I mean? It should have been when I started. It should have been from day one, but I was so focused on paid traffic that it's like you said, I just kept putting it off. You know,
Yeah.
I admit it. I admit it.
You'd be so surprised. Like there's stores that I look at that they're doing $1 million a month, no email, virtually nothing, 3, 4, 5%. There's stores that I look at doing 50 grand a month. Again, email's an afterthought. Every brand I talk to that's a little bit bigger, 100K a month, 150, 250 plus, they're like, oh man, we didn't know what we've been missing out on this whole time, the opportunity cost of not having it. And they're just like, sometimes I've been on the phone with people, they've cried before.
I believe it.
I swear.
I believe it.
I
believe it.
And they're just like, and it's like the craziest, it's awesome to help someone have the realization, you know?
Yeah.
But this is like a thing that so many people overlook. And so what I would say is like, if you look at the competitive landscape, anyone listening, most of your competitors aren't doing this. So it's like, you just have to do this one little thing better than them, and you're just going to steal market share.
Like sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for a store that's established, you know, like product market fit, I've never seen it not work, because it just makes whatever's already working work better.
Yeah. No, I keep seeing right now, Facebook is really tough right now. And obviously that's the go-to for most people when it comes to traffic for e-com. And so I'm all these groups in Facebook, and people are complaining, it's like all these costs are through the roof, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, guess what? If you guys had emails in place, and your email will be saving your ass right now to get you through this like tough time with Facebook. And not only that, you should be thinking about a million other things, but just one example of like concentrating on one thing and not paying attention, doing it as an afterthought. So that's for e-com. Now, for personal branding or, you know, a consulting firm or something like that, you have your list. Obviously, it's going to be, you know, click-through rate, open rate. How do you really segment those? Like the way I do it is, you know, I unsubscribe people automatically if they don't open X amount of emails, depending where they're at on the sequence, because what's the point of paying, you know, for people on your list if they're not going to open your emails or whatever. That's one top of my head. And then, you know, I segment based on if they took an offer or they click, you know, through the links. That's as basic as I have, because I'm actually handling that one myself, because I like to play with it just to keep on top of things. So what do you recommend when it comes to those kind of lists? Like somebody who has a personal list for personal branding, or they offer consultation services and stuff like that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I approach it like e-com also. I think the funnel is just simpler if you're info products or selling services, right? Mm-hmm. But if someone opts into whatever the thing is, they still have to be sort of evangelized and welcomed. You're trying to get them to take some action. So to your point, like if someone's gone through the whole sort of welcome flow, if you want to call it that, and they haven't opened or clicked, then again, I think that's a pretty good way to approach it in terms of like, where do you draw the line in the sand is, do I want to keep this person or not? Maybe at that point, even try like wait a few days and try like one last Hail Mary to like ask them, do you still want to be here? And if not, give them the unsubscribe link in the email so they take action. Mm-hmm. And even if they don't open that, you know, you're just going to unsubscribe them anyways, but at least you're asked them. Right. Because some might say like, yeah, I want to stay. The other thing too that I think is some low-hanging fruit, a lot of people in our space miss, like on the branding or info product services side, is like setting up something that's akin to abandoned cart for email. So if someone goes to the booking page but doesn't book, most people don't even communicate with those people. They don't have that action to message on. So that's another thing too. It's like if someone adds a product to a cart but doesn't buy, there's usually something that happened, right? Their dog ate their keyboard, or they got distracted, or they need some more info.
Right.
So same thing. It's like, okay, if they're on the booking page but don't book, then there's something that took place that kept them from doing it. So like, what can you send them to make them a little bit more certain that this is worth their time?
Right.
And so that's one idea. And then a lot of times I do it based on just like Facebook audiences, like 7-day leads, 8 to 14, 14 to 30, something like that. Because those are the people that are usually in the buying pocket the most.
Right. Right. I never thought about it that way. Use the same, you know, the way I do with retargeting ads. All right, 7 days, 14 days, 30 days. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Dude, if you listen to the whole thing, that's like the ultimate golden nugget right there. Because I mean, you guys know how much shit I know about this world, and I didn't even think about that just because I never really looked into it. That's a golden nugget, man. That makes it all worth it right there. So
try it out, dude.
Yeah, let's end it up on that note, on that high note, man. So if somebody's looking to hire you and your team for your services, where can they find you? I know we have the website. Tetra.co. Where else can they find you? I'll put all the links in the description, of course. What type of businesses do you prefer to work with? That way you don't get all these messages from all these people.
Yeah, you can find us on the site. You can shoot me a DM on Instagram, Tetra, go Tetra, or you can just email me, phil@gotetra.co. The businesses we work with, again, e-com is our bread and butter, but I've sold so many things via email. Anyone in business can get value from their own audience that they nurture and monetize. I've sold cloud hosting solutions to law firms, which is probably the most boring thing you could ever sell.
If you can sell that, man, mad props, because that sounds super boring.
Dude, but people always say like, oh, I don't know if email is going to work for me. Literally, if you have an audience or a customer base, it will work.
That's amazing.
So anyone listening, like e-com's our bread and butter, but we've sold info products, we've sold services, literally almost anything under the sun. So even if you're just want to reach out and ask questions if email can even work for you, my team and I will be glad to talk to them.
Sweet.
And give you guys our 2 cents.
That sounds amazing, man. Again, Phil, thank you so much. Guys, if you need email, this is your man. Go find him. Links in the description. And on to the next episode. Thanks for doing this again, Phil. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.